Paramount in President Johnson's vision for a great society was equality for all Americans. Among other measures in his quest for liberty and justice for all, he championed the Civil Rights Act of '64, banning discrimination based on race, color, sex, religion, or national origin, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which enforced the 15th Amendment to the Constitution by removing barriers to voting on the basis of race. Throughout her long career, Justice Ginsburg has dedicated herself to those same principles, as reflected by a few of her writings, which will be read here by three distinguished actors. Sunny Hostin, the Emmy Award-winning co-host of ABC's The View, Emmy Award-winning actress Holland Taylor, and Golden Globe-nominated actress Constance Wu. Please welcome them to the stage.
Good evening, everybody. It's very cool to be here. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Women and the Law, a symposium introduction, Rutgers University, May 1st, 1970, delivered by Rutgers law professor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In the United States, in very recent years, appreciation of women's place has reached the nation state. Activated by feminists of both sexes, courts and legislators are beginning to recognize the claim of women to full membership in the class people, entitled to due process guarantees of life and liberty and equal protection of the laws. But the distance to equal opportunity remains considerable. Some European countries, as slow to accord women the vote, have followed up more rapidly than has the United States the promise of an equal voice in societal affairs. The unfinished business of equality for women is gaining momentum. Thought and energy directed to it in the 1970s may contribute significantly to the healthy environment and society universally desired for the decades ahead. Critical to a brighter future is the continued development of activist but politically acute feminist organizations, groups dedicated to the principle of equality, but possessing the pragmatism essential to a movement whose ultimate success requires broad popular support.
An excerpt from Brief in Frontiero versus Richardson, filed in the United States Supreme Court, January 12, 1973, written by the director of the ACLU's Women's Rights Project, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Growing up in a society in which virtually all positions of influence and power are held by men, women believe that they belong to the inferior sex. Women who seek to break out of the traditional pattern face all of the prejudice and hostility encountered by members of a minority group. Worse than being discreet and insular, which for other minority groups at least has the advantage of fostering political organizing, women are separated from each other and therefore remain far distant from the political potential appellees ascribe to them. For women who want to exercise options that do not fit within stereotypical notions of what is proper for a female, women who do not want to be protected, but do want to develop their individual potential without artificial constraints, classifications reinforcing traditional male-female roles are hardly benign. Benign legislative judgments serve as constant reminders that, in the view of predominantly or all-male decision-making bodies, life should not be arranged this way.
Excerpt from the dissenting opinion of Shelby County versus Holder, June 25th, 2013, written by Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The Voting Rights Act became one of the most consequential, efficacious, and amply justified exercises of federal legislative power in our nation's history. Throwing out pre-clearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. The sad irony of today's decision lies in its utter failure to grasp why the Voting Rights Act has proven effective. Beyond question, the Voting Rights Act is no ordinary legislation. It is extraordinary because Congress embarked on a mission long delayed and of extraordinary importance to realize the purpose and promise of the 15th Amendment. For half a century, a concerted effort has been made to end racial discrimination in voting. Thanks to the Voting Rights Act, progress, once the subject of a dream, has been achieved and continues to be made. After exhaustive evidence gathering and deliberative process, Congress reauthorized the Voting Rights Act. It was the judgment of Congress that, quote, 40 years has not been a sufficient amount of time to eliminate the vestiges of discrimination following nearly 100 years of disregard for the dictates of the 15th Amendment, and to ensure that the right of all citizens to vote is protected as guaranteed by the Constitution. End quote. In my judgment, the court errs egregiously by overriding Congress's decision. Thank you.